ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit of the WoW podcast, Blue Please on CynicalBrit.com. Now, you're probably aware that I cancelled the show today because I'm fairly worn out. This medication kind of sucks. I was actually told that I wasn't supposed to go back to work for 2 weeks. Now, obviously, this is my work, so it's not like I'm doing manual labor or anything, but yeah, there's a reason I was told not to, and that's because I get very worn out under this medication regime. Whatever the case, I did, however, still feel bad about not putting out any WoW content today, so I thought I'd give this a bash. This is the Orc starting zone. Now, this is the Orc-only starting zone now. It used to be shared with the Trolls. The Trolls have their nice, swanky new place. And I wondered, well, have they updated any of it? And the answer is, well, a little bit. They haven't done an awful lot with it, but I like going through these because it's nice to point out what's changed. Now, why is it nice to point out what's changed? Because it should be fairly obvious to a lot of people. It can start a nice little design discussion, because you can analyze the changes based on the current state of the game and compare it to the original state of the game, because this is the one area that I remember very vividly. I do that because it was the first ever zone I leveled in. Of course it was. And I was a troll mage, and this was the first area I was in. I remember it very, very clearly now. I remember running around the cave, getting lost. I remember not being able to find the stuff I was looking for. I remember it being very crowded and not being able to get the cactus apples because people were grabbing them all over the place. I remember getting very mad about that. But they haven't done much to it, honestly. Now, some might argue that that's because it was good enough anyway. I would disagree with that strongly. I think there's a lot wrong with this zone. It's unfortunate that it's coming towards the end of the beta now. There's less than a month to go, I would think, before they close the beta down and, of course, launch on the 7th of December. So I very much doubt this is going to get changed now, but this entire area, for the most part anyway, is a one big missed opportunity. So quest-wise, the old boar killing quest is still there, but they've decided they're going to pen them in this time, make them a little bit of fish in a barrel, so you can still slaughter them and burn them with fireballs. It's a rather odd way of culling them for meat. Like, well, we would like you to go and cull some of the livestock so that we can have something to eat tonight. Can you do it with fireballs, please? Or arcane energies? Or corrupting shadow bolts? Or this giant axe that cuts them in two and leaves them a bloodied mess on the floor? I don't know. It seems like a very odd way of farming, but hey, who am I to judge? Now, we do have a new quest here, which is to just go kill a bunch of Northwatch scouts who are by far the worst scouts I've ever seen in my life. You can see them for miles. I mean, look at that. We're sneaking around. No one can spot us except for this level 2 Orc mage. I mean, come on. Seriously? This guy's so bored, he's challenging me to a duel. In the middle of the beta, of all things. Why would you do that? I have no idea. It's like, oh, look at me. I've got my heirloom items. I have twice your HP. La-di-da. Yeah, it's a very swanky boy. Aside from that, it's still picking up the cactus apples, which was a little bit more spread out. It was never really a problem, was it? Now, I think one of the big issues I've got with this area is fairly similar to what I've got with Mulgore, which is it's too big. It's got too much empty space in which nothing is done, and there's too much running back and forth. And we're talking about the main hub here, and then you're well aware, of course, of where Sarkoff is and where the guy you've got to rescue is. He's still there. I think it's a different guy this time, and instead of kneeling, he's lying on the floor in agony, but that seems like one opportunity that they could have taken to change things. I mean, for one, why is Sarkoff still alive? They were willing to kill everything inside of the dead mines and everything, except, well, bar one, in Shadowfang Keep and say, oh, well, everything's moved on now, and they've done a whole bunch of other things to those zones, but they left Sarkoff alive? Really? One of the most killed mobs in the game? It just seems bizarre. They couldn't even be bothered to rename him. Oddly enough, they've actually given him a bonus ability, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, the point of the fact is that this area is freaking enormous, and as a direct result of that, there's an awful lot of running. They don't make use of the remote quest hand-in system, so it would be a bit contrived, but I'm just thinking a flare, or considering how tribal this area is, a smoke signal, something like that, just to indicate that you'd completed a quest to go on to the next one. It's not the case, however, and you have to run backwards and forwards, especially from the cave, all the way back to the hub, and you have to do that several times. We've got to do it for the Scorpid Workers thing right here. He already wants us to go back for the Cactus Apple surprise. So it's a lot of wasted, dull, boring time that could be filled with other stuff. Now, during the Mulgore leveling videos before I quit in complete disgust with the whole affair, I was making suggestions along the lines of Red Dead Redemption, of quests appearing out of nowhere, sort of random quests that you might be able to grab. Now, of course, in really early starting zones, it can be difficult to justify that. The reason for that is quite simple. It can screw with the leveling curve that they've carefully designed, and you're supposed to leave this area at level 5 if you haven't gone out of your way to kill everything for no apparent reason, or unless you're like the heirlooms guy who's got loads of XP boosting items. Nonetheless, it's supposed to be there. That's actually a good point, isn't it? Think about that for a second. Considering they allow heirlooms anyway, they obviously don't care that much about the XP curve, so why not throw in a couple of these wandering quests and make things just a little bit more dynamic? I don't see enough of that, and I do think it is something they need to put in to spice up these areas. It's obvious from here that they haven't done much with the questing at all. They've just not touched it. Killing the Scorpids is exactly the same as it was. The Cactus Apples is the same. And then you've got Sarkoff. The quest is exactly the same as the previous one. Yes, you still have to go into the cave, although they have redesigned that a little bit, though not by much. They've made it a little bit easier. Because I'm sure some of you remember getting lost in that bloody cave. And yes, they have made it so that that's a lot harder to do. And you do get to hit the grunts on the head with the blackjack. You don't have to do as many, I don't think. You've only got to do 4 now. It's been a while since I did it, so it looks like they've nerfed that. Shocking. Shocking. All of this empty space and the lack of interest and interactivity of the area does contribute to this feeling that this is a weak starting zone and they should have done something with it. And I would rank it in terms of how poor it is on the level of the dwarf one. It really is, and that's actually very, very sad to say. When I did the dwarf one, which originally was the gnome one over in Coldridge Mountains, and then they changed it around and gave the gnomes a brand new one, which was head and shoulders above it, the dwarf one is still dull as bricks. It is not a good starting zone, and this qualifies as being bad as well. You've got to go here through to level 5, and then you go to Senjin Village as before, and there have been some changes around that for obvious reasons because of the way the Echo Isles now works, but still, this is not a good intro to the game. If I were rolling an alt, for instance, I would not be rolling an Orc, because I would know for a fact that I would have to deal with this. I mean, hell, if I wanted to really push the boat out and I wasn't really caring about money, I would roll up a Goblin, do the Goblin starting area, because that will take you through to level 12, then put you in a Shara, which is a really great leveling zone, and then switch it over to an Orc when I hit a higher level, if I so desired. Or alternatively, I could just stick with a Goblin, because they've got better racials anyway. Yes, I am an Orc mage. Just don't even want to know what's going on with that, honestly. Training the arcane missiles. Now, they have put these dummies in the area so that you can beat on them a couple of times just to make sure that you know what you're doing with arcane missiles. I would like to express a little bit of confusion, however. I would like to know exactly why the first spell you get is arcane missiles. Now, here's my thoughts on its rationale, and here's the fatal flaw in their thinking. They put this in so that you wouldn't be spamming the same ability over and over and over again up until level 5, where you got your Fire Blast, so you could throw something else in for good measure. Oh, it's one of those things again, isn't it? Ugh. Half trolls. Ugh, disgraceful. The sooner they fix that, the better, I might add. They still haven't done anything with it. I'm sure they've put it in just to spite me. Anyway, the point about arcane missiles is that, yes, it activates so you can press it, and you've got a little bit extra to do when you are just doing raw damage. However, here's the problem, and you're going to see that fairly shortly when we go over to the Imp area. The problem is this. There is no point. No point at all. Based on the damage that you are doing as a mage versus the creatures in this area, there is no reason to ever cast arcane missiles. So Arcane Missiles, I believe, takes about 2.7-ish seconds to fully cast now. So it fires 3 waves of missiles over about 2.7 seconds. and it's doing 13 damage per wave. Now, Fireball is doing, I think, about 28. So, versus the mobs in this area, around level 3 to 5-ish, you are going to be casting 3 times. Always 3 times. It takes 3 fireballs to kill the mob. Most of the mobs are standardized in terms of health, and that's obviously an effort by Blizzard to make sure that nothing is completely out of whack. But you've got to hit it 3 times. So, either you can hit it with 3 fireballs, or you can hit it with a fireball and then throw an arcane missiles in there and then another fireball. Here's the thing, though. It actually takes longer to kill it if you use arcane missiles than it does if you just spam fireballs, which makes it entirely pointless. So, my thought is either they've got to really buff arcane missiles at lower levels or just take it out of the goddamn rotation completely until much later. Give you something else, something that's a little bit more interesting. I don't see the point in spicing up a mage at this earlier level. Hell, give Fire Blast at level 3, so at least then I know I've got an instant cast that's going to be useful. Anyway, coming out of something that has changed. Sarkoff is right here, but he's been given a new trick. Now, I said that this was a zone of missed opportunities. Now, I'd like to show you why. So, he's got this ability called Venom Splash right here, and he can actually splash Venom on the ground. The problem is Sarkoff dies in about 4 seconds, so there is no point at all in that ability even being there. There is no chance for you to die to it. What I would suggest to Blizzard, and this should be a fairly easy change, I mean, this is just changing a variable in the database, give it about 6 times as much health as it currently has. So, make it so that what you're doing is you are moving to dodge those abilities, because then at least there is some kind of interactivity. Like, oh, there's a big bad scorpion, and I kill it just like any other scorpion. So, there is no challenge there at all. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, TotalBiscuit's on his masochism spree again. He wants everything to be able to kill him repeatedly. Well, no, it really comes down to this. You don't learn anything if it doesn't do anything, and that's not the most important thing, even. I mean, to me it is, because I want a more educated player base. I want to be able to group with people that are smarter. But for a newbie, it comes down to a matter of immersion and fun. Now, you've just been told through the quest text, if you're paying any attention to it, oh, Sarkoff is dangerous, he's lethal, and you must defeat him. Now, you're expecting some kind of epic encounter, and sure, it's a bit bigger than the other scorpions, but nothing happens. He dies so fast that there is no encounter there, and you're left thinking, well, that was a bit of a letdown, wasn't it? And it is. Now, if you give it loads more HP, at least, it lasts a little bit longer, and you've got to dodge those things. I'm not saying make it kill you instantly, but do enough damage to make you move the hell out of the fire. You know, your first encounter with the fire should matter. Because if it doesn't, then it's going to get you into bad habits. And again, just think about any single-player RPG you've done. The first ever sort of boss or quest mob, some special named guy that you actually came after. Just think about that for a second. And think about whether or not that was worthwhile. More often than not, you'll probably find that it was. It was balanced to be challenging. But in this case, it's a waste of time. So yeah. Give it 6 times the HP, Blizz. You know you want to. Let people beat on it for a while. Make it a good fight. Make it, maybe do a couple more Venom Splashes based on how many people are around it. Say if you're going to group up for it, make it do a Venom Splash on each person, so it actually seems a little bit epic. Now, you see these arcane missiles right here. It was actually 2.25 second cast. I couldn't really remember, but whatever the case, it is still a suboptimal way of doing damage, so there's no reason at all for casting arcane missiles. As I say, it's always 3 casts on every mob in this area, unless you miss. Or unless you get a lucky crit, of course. So, yeah, no point. It's nice to be able to go through this area and give it a little bit of a shakedown, even though I don't think they're actually going to change any of this now. I think it's probably too late. I still want to provide that feedback in the hopes that in a future patch they'll actually have time to look at it and say, yeah, you know what, this actually isn't as good as we could do. It's Blizzard's own fault, really. It's not just a case of them being lazy or whatever. It's actually about them doing too good a job on other areas. And by other areas, I'm thinking about all of the new starting zones. Echo Isles, Gnomrigan, Gilneas, Kezan, and Lost Isles. These are really good starting zones. And then, I think actually the best example is Tirisfal Glades, because they took Tirisfal Glades and they totally changed it. They took a starting zone that was not all that interesting and turned it into something that was, as opposed to the other ones, which are completely new areas. And, when you've got a completely new area, you've got a clean slate. But with the Undead one, they just demonstrated that they were absolutely 110% capable of making good, solid changes. Hell, even the start of Mulgore, level 1 to 5 of Mulgore was really good. It was. I mean, it was not a bad starting zone at all. So that is another starting zone where they've done that. And then with this one, they've just made these tiny little changes for the sake of convenience, like it was some kind of afterthought, and that's a disservice to the rest of the work that they've done, and it contrasts very, very starkly indeed. There are other zones that suffer from this. The dwarf starting zone suffers from this. It's, tweaks, if that. The human starting zone, I have been told, I haven't confirmed this yet, might have changed since I last ran it. But the state that it was in when I ran it, they barely did anything to it. It was not a good upgrade at all. And when it comes to the TBC starting areas, they haven't changed one freaking bit. So if you're wanting me to go to the Exodar and the Blood Elf place, no, I'm not going to do that because they are the same. I suppose you can justify that by saying, well, they were better than the others anyway, and I suppose that's actually true. They did put a lot more effort into them in the Burning Crusade, but they're still a little bit behind stuff that's now available. Now, this is the last set of quests before you end up outside of here, and yes, it is in the cave, which is a good couple of minutes run over there. So very, very foolish. Why can't they just have an outrider or just a scout out there that actually gives you some of these quests? Or can we at least just have some quests to do on the way back? So much running for no apparent reason. Let's just speed it up a little bit. Think about this for a second. There's barely anyone here in the beta, obviously. Why would you have people running the Orc starting zone? There's no point. They know that it's not in a good state. But think about it on launch, when more people are rolling alts, and just when it's on a normal server, it might be a little bit busier. Think about that for a second, because the concern you're going to have is that you're going to be running across vast plains of nothing, getting to the quest mobs you need, and then suddenly finding that they're farmed. So you've run across, done nothing, then you have to wait, doing nothing, and then compete for sparse mobs in a sparse area with nothing of interest. And by the time you're out of here, you're just glad to see the back of it. That can't be their intention, surely. And I know that the content onwards is much more fun, but this isn't convincing me as... Let's just assume that I was someone that had never played an MMO in my life. This does not convince me that this is a good genre. It convinces me that it is a boring, empty genre that is incredibly repetitious. Yes, repetitious. It is a real word. Oh, man. I read that comment on the Game Station's latest top 5. Oh, why are you making up words? And at which point I despaired for the future of humankind. Oh, Lord. Anyway, the point here is you're killing the Fellstalks, then you got that Burning Blade Medallion. You remember where the guy was before. Well, he has been moved. He's just been put on the floor now. You don't have to work your way around this cave. It's much easier to find your way in and out of it again. And they did make absolutely everything passive. Everything's neutral. It doesn't attack you at all, which I don't necessarily agree with, honestly. I can understand that, oh, well, it can take a while to go in here, but that just means that they need to redesign the quest. Like, well, you got to go kill those imps. Okay, well, why don't we combine the imp killing quest with this one then, so you actually have to wade in here and do some damage. Like I say, it's a lack of thought and a lack of effort that's actually being put into this area that really, not so much annoys me, it just disappoints me. It makes me sad inside, folks, and you don't want that. I've said it before, folks, and it bears repeating, and it will bear repeating until the end of time. The point about Blizzard Entertainment is that Blizzard Entertainment is not your average company, and they never have been. They have never been your average developer. Even the games that they made before some of you were even gaming, and probably cannot remember at all, were way, way above the level of games at the time. I'm talking about things like, hell, even the Death and Return of Superman, which is arguably their worst game. I think the hell they might be called Silicon and Synapse at that point, was a cut above the rest. And this starting zone isn't. Because they are that good, you should hold them to account. My name's been TotalBiscuit, and I will see you next time.